What do you leave behind when you die? Most people will say money. Some will say a house, a business, a name carved into a building. But in the village of Kowa, one forgotten old man left behind something that none of those things could buy. He left behind a pair of shoes. Not just any shoes, the finest pair ever made by human hands. And beside those shoes, a letter that would make an entire village go silent. This is the story of Baba Musa, the shoemaker nobody remembered, and Aisha, the little girl nobody was watching, and the secret that changed everything. Stay with me until the very end, because the lesson hidden inside this story is one you will carry for the rest of your life. He should have closed that shop years ago. That is what the village said about Baba Musa. Not loudly, not cruelly, just in the way people say things they believe to be obvious truths. At the market, over fences, between bites of food. The old man is still there. Doing what? Nobody repairs shoes anymore. He should sell that land and rest. He would die in that shop, mark my words. Nobody in Kowa fully understood what Baba Musa had once been. For more than 40 years, his hands had served this village. Rich farmers, village chiefs, teachers with worn-out heels, market women who could not afford new sandals. All of them had walked through his door. All of them had left satisfied. People used to say, if Baba Musa cannot fix it, nobody can. But time does not care about what you used to be. Modern stores opened in nearby towns. Cheap factory shoes flooded the market. The very people Baba Musa had served for decades now walked past his workshop without looking up. Days passed without a single customer. Weeks passed without a voice at the door. The man who had once held the village's feet in his hands became invisible. Children barely knew his name. Young men who passed his shop laughed. Look at that old place. Somebody should demolish it. He's just taking up space. Each word found him. He was never far away. He heard all of it. But Baba Musa never answered back. He simply smiled. That quiet, patient smile of a man who has lived long enough to understand something that young people haven't figured out yet. And he continued working. Because Baba Musa believed with every bone in his aging body that a person never loses their value. Not when the crowd stops watching, not when the work dries up, not even when the whole village forgets your name. He believed this the way other men believe in God. Quietly, completely, without needing anyone else to agree. But here is the other side of the story. The side that happened in the small moments nobody was writing down. In the same village, there was a 12-year-old girl named Aisha. She wore the same school uniform every day because it was the only one she owned. She walked to school barefoot most mornings to preserve her single pair of sandals for important occasions. Her mother sold vegetables in the market from before sunrise to after dark. And some evenings there was food, and some evenings there was not. Life for Aisha was the kind of difficult that does not announce itself. It simply exists, quietly, permanently. But every single afternoon, on her walk home from school, Aisha stopped at Baba Musa's workshop. Not because she was told to, not because anyone was watching, not because she expected anything in return. She stopped because she noticed him, and she had decided, in the simple and irrevocable way that children sometimes decide things, a person who was noticed should be greeted. Good afternoon, Baba Musa. Those 4 words, every single day. While the rest of the village walked past without looking up, one small girl in a worn school uniform stopped and said good afternoon.
The old man would look up from his bench and something in his face would change. Not dramatically, just soften. The way a room changes when a window is opened. Some days Aisha swept the front of his shop without being asked. Some days she fetched water from the well and left it at his door. Some days she simply sat on the small stool in the corner and listened to him talk about the old days when the village road was red dirt and the market chief wore a particular hat and everyone knew everyone's grandmother. He talked, she listened. That was enough for both of them.
Then came the rainy evening. Aisha was passing the workshop when she heard it. A cough. Deep and rattling, the kind that comes from somewhere serious. She stopped. Through the cracked wooden door, she saw Baba Musa hunched over his bench, trembling slightly. His hands, those extraordinary hands, were pale. His face was pale. She stood in the rain for a moment. Then she went home. That night, she could not sleep. She kept thinking about those hands, the way they trembled, the way they didn't stop working, even while trembling. The next morning, before school, she slipped into the kitchen. Her mother's pot from the previous night still had pepper soup inside. Enough for 2 people, maybe 3 if you are careful. Aisha filled a small bowl, covered it with a cloth, and carried it to the workshop. "Baba Musa," she said when he opened the door, "my mother cooked extra food." The old man looked at her, then at the bowl, then at her again. He knew. He had lived long enough to know the difference between extra food and food that someone chose not to eat themselves. He did not say this. He simply took the bowl with both hands, carefully, like it was something precious. "Thank you, my daughter." Aisha nodded and ran to school. She was already late. She did not tell her mother about the soup. Her mother would not have been angry, but Aisha did not want it to be a conversation. She did not want it to become a story that people told about her. She simply wanted the old man to have warm food. So she said nothing. And the next day, she came back. And the day after. And the day after that. For months. Not because she expected anything. Because kindness was simply part of who she was. The same way some people are simply tall or simply left-handed. Aisha was simply kind. It was not a choice she made every morning. It was just what happened when she passed the workshop and an old man was alone inside it. Unknown to the village, something was happening inside the workshop after dark. Every night, long after Kowa had fallen asleep, a lantern burned in Baba Musa's workshop. Villagers occasionally noticed it as they came home late from the market or returned from visiting relatives in the next compound. What is that old man doing? Who knows? Probably talking to himself. A small laugh, then footsteps continuing home. Nobody cared enough to stop and ask. Nobody except Aisha. One evening, she asked him, "Baba Musa, why do you work so late every night?" The old man looked up from his bench. His eyes, always gentle, carried something else now. Something she could not name. A kind of quiet urgency. He smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "a person has one final job to complete before resting." Aisha looked at the small wooden box on the corner of his bench. He had never opened it in front of her. He had never discussed it. But she had noticed it for months. The way it sat apart from everything else. The way his eyes sometimes moved to it when she thought she wasn't looking. She did not push further. She respected his silence the way he had always respected hers. But that night, long after she had gone home, Baba Musa opened the wooden box. Inside lay the finest leather he had ever owned, preserved for years, kept for a purpose he had not yet named. The leather was the color of dark honey in lantern light, supple, alive, the kind you could only find before the factory shoes took over the market, the kind that whispered of decades of craft knowledge. He laid it on the bench, and he began. Every stitch was deliberate. Every cut was precise. His eyesight was failing. His hands trembled sometimes, but his fingers remembered what his eyes could no longer see clearly. 40 years of skill lived in those hands, and every night, by lantern light, he poured all of it into one final pair of shoes. Then came the night of the storm. The rain did not arrive quietly. It arrived all at once, like a decision. The wind first, bending the compound trees sideways, then thunder that sat in your chest, then rain that fell not in drops but in walls. Koa went dark and stayed dark. Most people pulled their doors shut and stayed inside. Aisha lay in bed and thought about the workshop roof. She had noticed the cracks in it for months. She had noticed the buckets Baba Musa kept in certain corners. She knew what that meant. She lay there for maybe 10 minutes. Then she got up. Aisha, her mother's voice followed her to the door. Where are you going? Come back here. I will be back soon, Mama. She ran through the rain. The red earth roads were rivers. Her uniform was soaked before she reached the end of her compound. She pushed open the workshop door. Water was coming through the roof in 3 places. The floor was flooded. Baba Musa sat in the far corner on a raised stool, surrounded by buckets, shivering. On the bench, covered carefully with a cloth, the wooden box was dry. He had protected the box first, before himself. Aisha did not waste time. She moved tools off the floor. She repositioned buckets. She used cloths to redirect water away from the wooden bench where his life's work sat. She walked without speaking, and Baba Musa watched her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not gratitude exactly, something deeper than gratitude. When the storm finally eased, when the rain became just rain again, the old man looked at this soaking wet 12-year-old who had run through a storm to protect his workshop, and he could not speak for a long time. My daughter. Yes? Why do you care so much about an old man? Aisha wrung water from the hem of her uniform. She thought about it. Not performing thought, actually thinking. Then she shrugged. Because nobody should be alone. 5 words. And they broke something open in Baba Musa that had been sealed for years. He said nothing more. But that night, after Aisha left, he sat beside the lantern for a long time. Then he opened the wooden box, and for the first time, he knew exactly who the shoes were for. The village doctor came on a Tuesday. He was not a cruel man. He was simply a doctor, trained to give information without decoration. He examined Baba Musa for 20 minutes. He wrote something in his book. He closed the book. You should prepare yourself, he said. 3 words, quiet as anything, final as a door closing. Baba Musa nodded. He had known in the way bodies know things before minds admit them. He had known for months. The tiredness that sleep didn't fix, the weight that meals didn't lift, the strange lightness that kept settling over him at odd moments, like the world was slowly loosening its grip. That night, he sat inside the workshop alone. He looked at the walls that had absorbed 40 years of his life. The worn wooden bench, the tools hanging in their familiar places, the cracks in the floor that he had never gotten around to fixing. He had built nothing grand. He had accumulated nothing memorable.
His children had grown and moved away and called on birthdays when they remembered. His wife had been gone for so many years that some days he struggled to recall the sound of her voice, and that frightened him more than death. He sat in the dark and felt for the first time the full weight of what it meant to be forgotten while still alive. And then, Aisha. Her voice came back to him, that matter-of-fact 12-year-old shrug, those 5 words said with no drama, no expectation of a response, no awareness of how much they would mean. Because nobody should be alone. Baba Musa sat in the dark with those 5 words for a long time. Then he stood up, lit the lantern, opened the wooden box, and resumed working with a purpose so clear it was almost a physical thing, a renewed determination. He had one final job, one final gift, one final lesson to leave inside the village before he left it, and he was going to make it perfect.
A few days before the end, a wealthy businessman came from the city. He drove up to the workshop in a car that made children stop and stare. He was dressed in expensive fabric. He carried shoes that cost more than most Kowa families earned in a month. "Are you Baba Musa?" "Yes." "I heard you are the best shoemaker in this region. These need repairing. Can you do it?" The old man examined the shoes carefully. He turned them over. He pressed the leather. He checked the stitching. Then he repaired them. The businessman watched in silence. He had come expecting to wait. He had come expecting excuses about age, about eyesight, about tools. He got none of that. He got 40 years of skill applied to his shoes with quiet and total focus. When it was done, the businessman turned the shoes over in his hands for a long time. "I have been to shoemakers in Lagos, in Abuja, in London." He looked at Baba Musa. "I have never seen work like this." He placed a large stack of money on the bench. The old man counted out the exact amount for the work, pushed the rest back. "I only charge what is fair." The businessman stared at him. In a world that had spent decades teaching him to take as much as you can get, he was standing in front of a man who lived by a different rule entirely. He picked up his money. He walked to his car. He sat inside for a moment before starting the engine. Years later, the businessman would tell this story to his children, and his children would tell their children, not because Baba Musa was famous, but because he was honest. And in a noisy world, honesty is the thing that echoes longest. Kowa noticed the closed door at mid-morning, not because anyone was waiting for Baba Musa specifically, but because the door to his workshop had opened at dawn every single day for 40 years. The village was used to it the way it was used to the sun. You did not notice it until it was gone. An hour passed, then 2, then a neighbor tried the door, then another, then 3 men together pushed it open. The workshop was silent, in a way that rooms are only silent when the person who gave them life has left them for good. Baba Musa sat in his chair. His eyes were closed. His hands rested in his lap. Those extraordinary hands still and finally at rest. His face held an expression that nobody in that doorway could name immediately, but that all of them would remember for the rest of their lives. Peace. Complete and undisturbed peace. the peace of a man who finished what he came here to do. Someone went to tell the village chief. Someone went to get the women. Someone went to find the doctor, though they already knew what the doctor would say. And then one of the men standing in that doorway noticed something. On the workbench, something covered with a clean white cloth. He moved forward. He lifted the cloth. The room went completely silent. On the bench sat the most beautiful pair of shoes anyone in Kowa had ever seen. The leather was the color of dark honey in morning light. The stitching was impossibly fine, each stitch placed with the precision of someone who knew it would be the last thing they ever made. The shape of the shoes was perfect, not fashionable in a modern way, but timeless in the way that real craftsmanship is always timeless. They were not just shoes. They were 40 years of skill poured into one final act of love. Beside the shoes, folded neatly, was a sealed letter. The village chief arrived within the hour. By then, half of Kowa had gathered outside the workshop. Not because anyone had announced it, but because news of that kind travels in a village the way smoke travels. You don't see it move. It is simply everywhere at once. The chief took the letter. He looked at it for a moment. Then he broke the seal and read aloud. My dear friends of Kowa, if you are reading this, I have completed my final journey. Beside this letter, you will find the finest pair of shoes I have ever made, the finest I was capable of making. I have been working on them for many months. I wish them to be given to the child with the kindest heart in this village. Not the richest, not the most celebrated, not the one whose name is spoken loudest, the kindest. Because I have lived a long life, and in that long life, I have watched many things come and go. Money came and left. Reputation grew and shrank. Customers arrived and disappeared. But every act of genuine kindness I ever witnessed, every single one, left a mark that never faded. Kindness is the only thing I know of that grows every time it is given away. Find the child who has been giving it away. They will not be difficult to find because they will be the last person who expects to be found. The chief finished reading. The workshop was so quiet you could hear the wind moving through the mango tree outside. And then one elder, a man who had lived in Kowa for 70 years and had seen most things worth seeing, spoke very quietly. He already knew. The village chief appointed 5 elders. They went to work immediately, not because they were in a hurry, but because they understood what this was. Baba Musa's final wish was not an errand, it was an obligation. The last message of a man who had spent 40 years in quiet service to this village deserved to be carried out with the same quiet seriousness. They visited homes, they spoke to teachers, they sat with market women, they asked children. They always asked the same question. Tell us about an act of kindness you have seen from someone who did not know you are watching. That last part was important. From someone who did not know you are watching. Because kindness that performs for an audience is something else entirely. What they were looking for was rarer, harder to find. Kindness with no audience at all. Some brought out trophies, some mentioned academic grades, some spoke of generous donations made at community gatherings, made publicly, announced clearly with the giver's name spoken in front of many witnesses. The elders listened politely. And then one teacher said, "There is a girl. She shares her lunch with children who come to school without food. She has been doing this for 2 years. I only noticed recently because I saw her eat nothing herself one afternoon and realized she had given her food away. When I asked her about it, she said she had not been hungry. She was lying." And a market woman said, "There is a girl. She helps elderly people carry their baskets. She doesn't ask, she just appears beside them and takes the heavy side without being invited. Old Mama Chioma told me about it. She said the girl never tells her name." And a neighbor said, "There is a girl who visited every sick person in this compound during the rainy season, every single one. She brought nothing. Her family has nothing to bring. She just came and sat. That was all. She sat with people so they were not alone." Again and again, the same girl, Aisha. But it was when the elders learned about the workshop, about the months of food carried in a small bowl, the afternoons of swept floors, the well water fetched without being asked, the storm night when a 12-year-old ran through a village flood to protect an old man's workshop. It was then that the eldest of the 5 elders stood up from his chair and said simply, he knew exactly who he was making those shoes for. Before the decision was announced, one elder examining the masterpiece shoes noticed something. He ran his hand along the inside of the left shoe. His fingers found an edge, a small seam, sewn differently from the rest. He walked at it gently. Inside was a hidden compartment built with the same extraordinary care as everything else about the shoes. Inside the compartment was a small folded note. The chief unfolded it. The handwriting was Baba Musa's, smaller than the letter, as though written when his eyes were already struggling. "If the child who receives these shoes is the one I believe it should be, tell her this. The world will sometimes reward greed. It will sometimes celebrate those who take more than they need and call it ambition. Do not be confused by this. Kindness leaves footprints that do not disappear. You have been leaving them since you were small, in places you did not know anyone was looking. Someone was always looking. Keep walking that path. The road will open for you." Several elders wiped their eyes. No one spoke for a long time. News spread through Kowa the way light spreads when a door is opened. The village square filled. Traders left their stalls early. Children sat beside their parents. Even people from nearby compounds who had no direct connection to Baba Musa came because they understood, in the way communities understand these things, that something worth witnessing was about to happen. At the center of the square, on a table covered with white cloth, rested the masterpiece shoes. Aisha sat beside her mother near the back of the crowd. She had no idea why she had been asked to attend. She thought it was simply a community gathering. She had worn her school uniform, the one she wore every day, slightly faded at the collar, carefully ironed. She was not expecting anything. She was never expecting anything. The village chief stood. The crowd went quiet. "My people, we are here to fulfill the final wish of a man who served this village for 40 years. A pause. We searched for many days. We asked many questions. We looked for the child whose heart reflects true kindness, not the kindness that performs, but the kindness that continues when no one is watching. The square was completely still. That child never sought recognition. A pause. That child helped others without expecting reward. Another pause. That child is Aisha. For a moment, Aisha thought she had heard someone else's name. She looked at her mother. Her mother's hand had gone to her mouth. Her eyes were already full. Then the crowd erupted. Applause, the kind that starts slowly and then becomes something else, something with feeling inside it, the kind of applause that is really an apology, a recognition, a correction of something that should have been said long ago. Aisha stood. Her legs were not steady. She walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for her. People she had greeted every day, people she had helped carry things, people she had sat with in the market. They watched her walk past with expressions she had never seen directed at her before. The chief placed the shoes in her hands. She held them. The leather was warm from the afternoon sun. It was softer than anything she had ever held. The stitching was so fine, she could barely feel where one stitch ended and the next began. She turned them over slowly. Then the chief placed the hidden note in her hands. She read it. And every afternoon she had ever spent in that workshop came back to her at once. Every story he had told her, every bowl of soup she had carried in the cold morning, every afternoon she had sat on that small stool and listened, simply listened, because it had seemed like the obvious thing to do. She remembered what he had said to her once, on an afternoon when two young men had walked past the workshop laughing. Bitterness is heavier than any burden. She remembered the afternoon she had found him staring into the distance, and he had said, "The people we love never truly leave." She remembered tapping his chest. "They stay here." And standing in the village square with his last gift in her hands, she understood something that she had not fully understood when he said it. He had not been talking about his wife. He had been talking about himself. He had been telling her that he would stay, that the people we love never truly leave. They stay here, in exactly the right place. Not everyone was gracious about it. This is a village. Villages are complicated. At the market the next morning, several women gathered near the yam stalls. That small girl, the one with the single uniform. Her mother can barely feed her, and now she gets those shoes. What will she even do with them? There was laughter. The comfortable, slightly cruel laughter of people who have just missed something and are pretending not to care. Then, Baba Garba, 71 years old, leaning on his walking stick, who had known Baba Musa since they were both young men, waited for a gap in the laughter. Then he spoke. "You are laughing at the child who brought soup to a sick old man every morning for months, while all of you walked past his door without looking up?" Silence. "You are questioning the judgment of a man who spent 40 years fixing things that were broken for this village, while some of you stood outside his workshop and said it should be demolished." A deeper silence. The specific silence of people who have been correctly told about themselves and know it. Baba Garba said simply, and he walked away. Nobody said anything further. But Aisha's mother, Ajara Matu, who had been standing nearby, heard every word. She went home. She went to her room. She sat on the edge of her bed. And she wept. Not with sadness, but with the specific, overwhelming relief of a mother
who had spent years watching her daughter move through a difficult world with a kind heart and no armor, always quietly afraid that the world would break something in her. And finally, watching the world give something back. Aisha did not suddenly become wealthy. Life did not immediately become easy. The scholarship came from a visiting organization 2 years later. A representative had traveled to Kowa on unrelated business, and a teacher had told him about a girl who gave her lunch away. He had looked at her academic records. He had come back with papers. When Aisha received the scholarship letter, she sat with it for a long time before telling her mother. When she finally told her, her mother read the letter 3 times. Then she put it down. Then she picked it up again. Then she left the room. Aisha found her in the kitchen, standing at the window, very still. "Mama?" Her mother turned around. Her face was doing several things at once. "Baba Musa said the road would open," Aisha said. Her mother pulled her close, said nothing, held on. University was not easy. Aisha was not one of the wealthy students. She did not have the things they had, the laptops, the clothing, the easy confidence of people who have never had to worry about whether there will be food. But she had something they were still learning to carry. She had the knowledge that kindness given without expectation still arrives somewhere, that invisible work still leaves marks, that you can help from a position of very little and change something permanently. She volunteered at clinics, she tutored struggling students, she showed up for people who did not ask her to. Not because she was performing virtue, because kindness was simply part of who she was, just as it had always been. 10 years after that afternoon in the village square, a car turned onto the red dirt road of Konawa. Children stopped and stared, the way children always stare at cars in Konawa. Then one of them shouted a name, then another. By the time the car stopped, there was a crowd. Aisha stepped out, not as a schoolgirl, not as the daughter of the vegetable seller, not as the girl in the single school uniform, as a doctor. She stood on the road she had walked barefoot to school and looked at the village she had grown up in and breathed in the particular smell of red earth and mango trees and cooking fires that she had been carrying in some deep part of herself for 10 years. She visited the grave first. She carried the shoes with her. She knelt beside the marker under the old tree and stayed there for a while. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "You were right." The wind moved through the leaves above her. "I never stopped being kind." She looked at the shoes in her hands, and the road opened, just like you said. The free clinic opened on the edge of Kowa village 6 months later. No patient was turned away. No child was denied treatment for want of money. No elderly person sat at home suffering because they could not afford the fare to the city. Above Aisha's desk, in the small office that smelled of antiseptic and fresh paint, stood a glass display case. Inside rested a pair of shoes. Old now, the leather still remarkable, the stitching still extraordinary. Every new patient who came to the clinic saw them. Many asked about them. Her answer was always the same. They were made by a man who spent 40 years serving people who eventually forgot him. He never stopped, he never became bitter, and before he left this world, he put everything he knew and everything he felt into one final act of love for a person he believed in. They remind me that greatness is not measured by what you earn. It is measured by the lives you touch. And so the legacy of Baba Musa lived on. Not through wealth, not through buildings with his name on them, not through statues in the village square. Through a doctor in Kowa who never turned anyone away. Through a clinic where the forgotten were remembered. Through a girl who once brought soup to an old man because it seemed like the obvious thing to do. Through kindness, the one investment that continues paying dividends long after you are gone. 3 things to carry from this story. The first, your worth does not depend on the crowd's attention. Baba Musa served this village for 40 years. The village forgot him. He kept working, not because he was foolish, not because he had no feelings, but because he understood something that takes most people a lifetime to learn. The value of your work does not change based on how many people are watching. You are not less because you are unseen. You are not less because the world moved on and left you standing. Keep working. Keep serving. The right witness will arrive. The second, kindness without recognition is still kindness. Aisha brought food every morning for months. She swept floors that no one asked her to sweep. She ran through a storm for a person who could give her nothing. She never told anyone. She never sought praise. She simply kept showing up. Her kindness did not belong to the village's approval of her. It belonged to her. This is the rarest form of goodness, the kind that does not require an audience to continue. If you are waiting to be seen before you decide to be kind, you have misunderstood what kindness is. The third, what you plant in quiet, you harvest in ways you cannot predict. Aisha planted nothing that looked like a future. She planted soup, swept floors, afternoon conversations, a run through the rain. She planted these things in a forgotten old workshop with no calculation, no plan, no idea that any of it was becoming something. And it became a scholarship, a degree, a clinic, a life. You cannot see the shape of what your small kindnesses are building. You are not supposed to. You are only supposed to keep planting.
To everyone who is still planting, if you are Aisha today, if you are the one who helps without being asked, and gives without being thanked, and shows up without being invited, if you have ever wondered whether any of it matters, whether anyone notices, whether the quiet work you do in small corners of the world is adding up to anything at all, it is. Someone is always looking, even when you cannot see them, even when the room feels completely empty. Keep bringing the soup. Keep sweeping the floor. Keep running through the storm. Keep sitting with people so they are not alone. The road will open, just like he said.